discussing that all the letters came before Hashem to try and be used to create the world. And you have Shin, Reish, Kuf in that order. So the Reish and the Kuf, it said they were not chosen because they're from the side of Klippa. They showed themselves on the Sitra Dabisha. Sitra Dabisha.
What was Tuf?
Shin.
Tuf. What was the Tuf?
Tuf didn't win. It was a tough call, but he was the first man out.
Why?
Huh?
Say?
Yeah, it also says about, all the letters.
It has every...
Ayin Sham. See there. Anyway, so the idea is that they are on the side of, so to speak, evil. And in order for them to stick around and Bichlal exist, it said they need to take a shin with them, to have a kesher, as we said, to keep them in the game, to keep them connected. Kesher is shin, kuf, reish. Those letters, not in that order. And furthermore, why were they not chosen? Because, in other words, why was Shin not chosen? Because even Shin, because it is able to band up with those guys, then it also participates in Sheker. Because we said no truth goes unpunished. No. We said that when you want to speak falsehood, you take a kernel of truth. And that's the Shin, which is a letter of truth. And so you see that the Kuf and the Reis join up with the Shin to make Sheker, so that their Sheker will last, so their falseness will last. And in general, we're talking about this because the Keresh, the beams of the Mishkan, right? They are the same letters, and we're discussing like what the letters are all about in the name of Keresh. And I guess I'll let the cat out of the bag here. Just like Shtus, the concept was that you take something made of folly and you turn it into the Holy of Holies, you turn it into the Mishkan. So too these letters of Sheker and so forth, it's ultimately they turn into Keresh and they become the boards of the Mishkan. But in the meantime, before we sort of get to there, we started to discuss that the Kuf and the Reish themselves, even though they're bad letters, they have a good counterpart, which is the Hey and the Dalet and the Hey. Dalet and the Reish look similar, almost exactly, and their meaning is exactly the same, which means they both mean poor, poverty. And we didn't get to the Kuf and the Hey yet, but they also look similar, just that we said the left leg of the Kuf is long. And we started talking about the Reish and the Dalet, saying that even though they look similar, if you switch them around, if you replace one with the other, it's called destroying worlds, right? In other words, instead in the place of achad, you would say acher. In the place of same idea, or in the place of acher it says achad. Either way, you're destroying the worlds, like we said yesterday. The idea being is that even though they look similar and they have the same meaning, they're really complete opposites. One is on the side of kedusha, and one is on the side of klippa. Right? And we said what gives the Dalid its saving grace is that it has a yud sticking out the end of it. Because the Dalid has this yud, that's what makes it ultimately from the side of kedusha, and it's really on the good side, because the yud represents bittul, self-effacement, and the idea is that Dalet in general represents malchus of atzilus. It also represents speech. So we said all those things have the same thing in common. They all get themselves out of the way and are an empty vessel in order to allow something higher than them to shine through. Malchus of atzilus, it minimizes itself so that it can be a kli for the light of the 9 spheres that are above it. Speech is just a receptacle for the emotions and the intellect which is above it. And it's all because they have this yud attached to them that represents the Indian of bittul. Yeah, it's a little summary of what we said yesterday. So, let's pick it up from inside. So we started talking about the nature of this bittul of the student to the teacher. That it says he has to be a klirei kan machzik mali eno machzik. So it says an empty vessel holds, a full vessel, something that's already full, doesn't hold anymore. Which we said, if you have any measure of self inside of your attempt to receive, whatever measure of self you have, it's going to be to that measure that you're blocking the full reception. So in the state of, for example, Malchus of Atzilus, since you're trying to receive something infinite, any measure of self at all already basically blocks the whole reception, because you can't receive something infinite if you are not an absolute nothing. Right? If you're a something in some regard, then how are you going to hold into that state of something, in that shape that you have, something which is beyond shape and completely infinite? And we said the same thing is true when it comes to receiving, let's say, like the chosrim of the Rebbe. If you're going to start thinking thoughts in the middle of receiving the mimer, you're not going to be able to receive it. It's not going to come in, because you're filled, even with something good, you're filled with the mimer itself, trying to rethink it. It won't allow you to receive the rest of the information. And so we say, take it from the line that starts Machzik, about 8 lines down from page 120. Kamo makabel hine bichdei sheyeh kli lekabala. In order that he could be a kli to receive, it's only when it's in a state of real bittul and lowliness. Only then is he really a vessel to receive the true shefa of the Rav. In other words, he says true shefa, because you can definitely receive something, but you receive something chitzonius, you won't get like the real message. If you come with your own preconceived notions and your own understanding, right? Oftentimes it says why it's easier to work with a Yid who doesn't already have a Torah background, quite frankly, when it comes to trying to explain to them Hasidus and the ways of the Baal Shem Tov, than one who does. Because it already has a Shita, And when you already have a Shita, you're already built up into something. It's very hard to listen to another Shita. It's just it's a human nature. You already think you know something, right? It could be that the information you're trying to receive is on a whole other domain, but you're not a Kli L'Kabbalah. Right? So, I was just reading a Yud Shvat Sikh, actually. It's kind of a complicated one, but the Rebbe says over there that the way of the world and the way of Kedusha works in 2 different ways. That the way of the world is that you have to start yourself with a Metzias, right? You start off by building yourself up, making yourself strong, turning yourself into somebody, and then you could start to put inside of that sort of higher ideas and godly understandings. Just like the way that they wanted to make decrees in Russia that the Jewish people, they could learn Torah. When the communists I'm talking about, they could learn Torah, but they had to first become a normal person. In other words, if you go through the regular schools, be like a regular man of the world, then when you get yourself sophisticated and you have ideas of your own, you can think for yourself. Then if you want to go and explore the religions of the world, you're allowed to, right? But in Torah, it's the exact opposite way. You start off with the Torah with no metzias. You start off with the Torah even before you're born. Your parents already have to sanctify themselves, at the time of relations. Literally, they're thinking about the kedusha of the child before he's even born. As soon as he comes out, they put all these, kameyas all around him, little shir amaluses that he's surrounded by kedusha, and there's pictures of tzaddikim. 8 days later, he's at a bris. What are you doing to this guy? He's already he's such a frum yid. He's only 8 days old, doing such a mitzvah, right? And so you give him the full gamut of Yiddishkeit, and only then he figures out who he is. It's the same thing the Rebbe says we do every single day in davening. You start off your day before you can, you're groggy-eyed. First, Amode Ani, you're Jewish, first of all. Secondly, I'm going to go run, and I can't really think straight. I'm going to run to Hasidus class, daven, put on tefillin, all my mitzvahs. I'm mitzvahed up, and then I'm going to figure out what I do with myself, right? Because the mitzias part of you, if you're going to build yourself up into somebody, it has to come after the Yiddishkeit part of you. Because why? Because if you're already a mitzias, you're not going to be able to accept Yiddishkeit. Because you're already full of yourself. You already think you're somebody.
Mitzias is like
a sense of self-importance. It's good once you have your Yiddishkeit down. Then he says, okay, we're not saying you don't have a Metzias. You spend the rest of the day steiging in Torah, becoming wise, right? Learning more, making yourself bigger and bigger and bigger. He says, but if you try to do that and you don't have the proper foundation, right? Then the bigger you are, he says a pasuk over there that your house winds up being your your grave, because the bigger you build yourself up, when it doesn't have a proper foundation, it's bound to fall, and all your wisdom and all your talents and all the thing you've made into yourself, if it's not based on Yiddishkeit, that the purpose of it is clear and known, that you're mamash a chassid, and that's why you are building yourself up to serve Hashem, then the whole thing eventually will fall down on you, and the bigger it is, the more dangerous it is. It's very, so he actually, it was a horah to yeshivas like this one, where he was saying that you know, don't think that this is a yeshiva that works like the yeshivas of old. And really he was saying yeshivas in general these days. He said it used to be that you come, a student comes into a yeshiva in such a way that he got his bris and his, you know, proper absorption in Yiddishkeit in his house. And all the yeshiva has to do then is build him up into a Metzias. Teach him Rambam, teach him Tosfos. In other words, give him knowledge and information because he already has a good foundation. He said in these days it's not like that. Not only in yeshivas like this one, but in any yeshivas, he says, you can't count on the home. People come from who knows what's going on in the home. So the yeshiva has to start with foundation, basically. Inspire a person to realize what the purpose of his life is. You don't just start sending him into the Talmud and giving him, you know, pure intellect and just like sort of, you know, growing in wisdom. You have to give him a proper foundation of what his life is there for. And then, okay, if you get, that's the first thing. As he has that, great, go become like a scholar. Absolutely, you have to build yourself into it, but it's the opposite order. So anyway, back to the Maimer. He's saying the same thing over here. That if you are a somebody already, you're not going to receive anything. So if you want to receive from Hashem, you have to first make yourself completely bittul. You're a nobody. You're an 8-day-old baby. Then you're a kli lekabel amisis hashpasar. Then you can actually receive the true influence of what the Rav is trying to say to you. Not when you have other ideas. And it's not even enough simply that the student is not a big yesh and an arrogant person. In other words, that's already for sure a prerequisite. You can't be totally holding on to foreign ideas. In other words, what I just said, that he's a misnagid and he already knows his ways and he has, you know, a minhag from his fathers that he's already good to go. That's for sure you're not going to understand the thing the Rebbe is saying because you're not even a kli bechlal. It's more than that. Let's say you don't have that issue. Kim davka kasher yebchinas bittul veheder metzias. You have to be completely a non-entity altogether, not just not arrogant. The more you'll get out of the way, the more you can receive. So there's a physical example of this, he says, from the power of that we have in our self called throwing or moving something or lifting something up, the power of movement. Right? Lagbiya is a mas. In other words, when you want to pick up some type of heavy load. Right? So it's really the power of koach hatanua means power of movement in the body. If you want to pick up a heavy load, the masakala, a light load, you don't need much preparation. You just pick it up. Done. Masa kveda, but if it's a heavy load, the more you will contract yourself in preparing for it, it all depends. That's how much you're going to be able to pick it up. Contract yourself means like to bend yourself down, sort of like hone in on your muscles and so forth, you know. It literally could just be to bend yourself down, you know.
It's like jumping.
Jumping, there you go, right? The higher you want to go, the more of a running start you need, right? In other words, the preparation of how much you want to extend yourself all depends on how much you prepare yourself first. And really contract yourself is what he's trying to say, that jumping is an easy way to see it, right? Because you have to go down before you can go up. And the more you go down, the higher you can go up.
What do you mean by contracting yourself? Like
by making less. Like you're trying to get over the wall, but you go backwards. Why are you going backwards?
Mm-hmm.
Trying to jump over a wall.
Exactly.
You're trying to jump higher, you're bending down. Why are you bending down?
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, making yourself less. Going the other way.
Making yourself less to go higher.
Yeah, the more you contract yourself. Yeah, I guess make yourself less. The
If
more
you want to jump over this table, you're going to go to the end of that room.
Mm-hmm.
Right, there you go. V'zeu lo timtza bagasi haruach v'lo b'mi shemarchiv aleh libo kayam. And it says, therefore, the Torah cannot be found in amongst those who are what's called gasei ruach, who are arrogant. V'lo mi shemarchiv aleh libo kayam, and not those who make their hearts as wide as the sea. In other words, you just can't. You just have to. You just won't get it. It won't come inside of you. Well, you can pick up a light load. You can have some kind of little ray of the Torah, but you can't really understand what the Rav is saying. The Gasi Ruach hu she'ein lo bittul. So those are two different things. Someone who is inflated ruach, right? He is a more coarse example. That he just has no bittul. Right? He wants to do what he wants to do. He came here for his own reasons. He's got his own agenda. He's not going to get anything. There's no preparation. There's no humility and bittling on his side. He cannot. It's understood already. He's not going to be able to receive anything from the Torah. Right? Just think about the whole original receptance of the Torah. Again, Naisa v'nishma. You have to go to a state of we'll do it before we understand it. Right? So there's a trick involved. That in order to receive something Torah, it's not like receiving other wisdoms. You do not have to contract yourself in the same way to receive other wisdoms in the same way. Because it's basically a finite wisdom. You could be, sitting around doing whatever you want to do, eating your potato chips and lying in bed and pick it up and gain it. In other words, it doesn't require you because it's not a divine wisdom where it only lets itself in under certain parameters and under certain conditions. Right? So you for example, a Jew really is withheld from doing certain mitzvahs unless he has a bris, right? So what's the problem? I'll do the mitzvah too. No, you have to prepare yourself. You have to humble yourself to cut off precious parts of your body to be invited into this game. In other words, it's the same thing when it just comes to your approach to receiving Torah on a daily level. You have to not be in a state of arrogance. Do whatever you want. Even the second level, which is apparently less of a coarse situation, someone who has his heart as wide as the sea, which means he's not arrogant, he's just a wide heart. Meaning what? That he comes to the class and he's listening and so forth, he's not stop doing whatever he wants, but at the time of learning, like that reception of the Maimer we were saying, he's not batul b'tachlis. He has his own ideas in the class, in the Maimer. Just for example, a student that when the time that the teacher is busy giving it over, he's thinking out what the matter in his own way. In other words, he's trying to explain the Gemara, I'm saying the Rav, and the student, instead of listening, he's basically also trying to understand the Gemara at that moment and figuring it out on his own, which is definitely a positive thing to figure out the Gemara on your own. But again, building yourself up into a Metzias should come after the bittul part of receiving.
So what if you, I guess it's including if you say, I want to be a chassid, or I want to become a Breslev, so I want to learn Breslev Torah. And that's what you have in your mind, that you want to be a Breslev chassid.
Meaning what?
When you learn the Torah, you say, I want to become a chassid.
No, when you're learning it though, when you're actually learning it, you want to become nothing. You're not even there. You're just receiving, right? Yeah. So any type of like sort of self-motivating interests at the time of reception is blocking your reception, right? Even if they're positive ones, right?
Yeah.
Even if like you're saying, I want to be a chassid, I want to be a chassid. That mantra in your mind, I want to be a chassid, is every time you say it, you're missing a word. So at the time when he's receiving, he's busy thinking over the matter on his own. Whereas in the truth is, at the time of action, he needs to be rak lekabel divrei harav. He just needs to be receiving, right? Because it's subtle inyanim that are being given over. And he has to get his hands around the exact reception of what's going on. Then absolutely, afterwards, once he's got it, then he can start thinking it over, mulling it over and figuring out if it makes sense to him. But first he has to sort of receive it. And meanwhile, while he's doing it, this wide-hearted man, he is thinking about the matter the way he understands it according to the obligations of his intellect. Which means he's not at that moment really bittul. He's there, he's a full vessel, he can't receive. The true receiver is absolutely an empty slate when he's in the process of receiving. He's got no vested interest or way he understands it as it's happening. And frankly, this is called Kedusha. Right? Short of this, because Yeshus is the opposite of Kedusha. Self is the opposite of Kedusha. So when it comes to Kedusha, who are we? Right? What good luck, where was the Kedusha in the world for the first couple thousand years before the Torah was given? You can't just get this thing called Kedusha. That's what I'm saying. It's not like other sciences where you go ahead and take it. It's up for grabs. When it comes to Kedusha, it's not from here. That's why it's called Kedusha. It's not from this place. So if you want it, you can't take it on your terms. You have to remove yourself and take it on its terms. And this that he's giving the analogy of the student and the teacher, it's just an analogy. In other words, to explain what it means. At least when it comes to Torah learning, you can't learn like that. You may very well be able to learn, other things in that way. But when it comes to Torah learning, for sure, you're not going to be able to receive. Because the thing you're trying to get is not really human intelligence in the first place. This is the Indian of Kedusha Sheyeh B'chinas Bittul B'tachlis. There has to be no you. Ubezeh who kol inyan ha'avoda. And that's what we call in every place avoda. What do you mean you're working on yourself? Davening. The whole idea is to be in a state of toiling to get yourself out of the picture. Bezehu ha'bitul b'chinas malchus. And who has this, so to speak, in spades? The one who champions the cause of real bittul is Malchus of Atzilus, the Dalit. As we said, it's got this Yud hanging on the end of it, which is, it puts it in a state of constantly drawing itself out of the picture, constantly putting itself on the side, constantly being able to receive, therefore. Like there's a famous mimer of the Rebbe in the first years that he gave a mimer, and was speaking about that real Kedusha, the real levels of holiness, is that a person can't even for a moment sort of take a deep breath and feel that he has some satisfaction from his work. Because the second you're going to have a slight piece of satisfaction from your work, at that moment you're not bittul, you're not working anymore. Right? So when the Rebbe started saying this, he couldn't hold himself back. He just started crying, and in the middle of the tapes of the mimer, you just hear he's like saying this word, and all of a sudden he chokes up and he's like crying, and he can't stop crying. Right? Because he was actually worried about that. we forget about stopping our work because we're having a satisfaction. We're stopping our work because we're watching a football game, right? But imagine being in such a state of almost being there that even just like taking a deep breath and enjoying a bit of satisfaction from the fact that you just, gave over. You or the Rebbe just gave over a Hasidic mimer. You did that. You can't stop right when you're done and be like, "Whew, that was a tough one." No, any moment of satisfaction is hepek hachavana. The opposite purpose of the whole creation of existence, because you're not at that moment bittul.
Like after the chuppah.
Right? So it's it's the same thing we find by Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. It says at the end of his life, he said, "Eini yodeh be'eza derech molichin osi." He said, "I don't know where they're going to take me to, Gan Eden or Chas v'Shalom Gehenna." Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was like one of the greatest people that ever lived on the face of the planet. How could he not know when his life was over which place they're going to take him? I mean, if he's not going, who's going? So
we're going to Gehenna.
So he said, the answer is that he never stopped to think about it the whole time. In other words, he was so righteous until the day of his passing. He's like, what's up with me, by the way? Where am I? Because this is, he was a constant state of avoda. Totally, at every moment, being a receiver, he never considered his situation. Where am I?
Is Balshova, is that like this, like he became Balshova at the end?
Right, there is such an Indian like that, yeah.
What?
No, at that moment, that he he was such a perfect tzaddik, that the one thing that he lacked, I guess, was the ability to be a Baal Tshuva, right? So for a second, right before he died, he said, where am I? So he fell from grace, and then he could do tshuva, and died with tshuva.
Wait, and this is Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, right?
Right. I mean, that's yeah. I mean, I don't know. I heard that once.
But the Rebbe stressed that we should celebrate our partial success.
Celebrate our what?
Partial success.
The Rebbe said that?
Yeah. It's in a book called Fight for Life. It says that we should
celebrate. I'm not sure. In other words, you're never in a state where you're not happy. But if you celebrate In other words, look, there's different levels of what we're talking about here. Because if you're talking about a normal human being, and the fact that he's dealing with a very heavy-duty Yetzer Hara, which is going to get him down anyway, and he's not going to be in a state where he's bittul 24/7. So then you got to work with the material you've got. But right now we're talking about emes, and the emes is that the Rebbe started crying because he said you can't even have one moment of respite from the avoda, even to the state that you sort of take a deep breath and have a moment of satisfaction from your work. At that moment, at least, it's sheker. Now you're saying that we should have satisfaction. Okay, we're anyway living in a world of sheker. So in other words, you have to go in stages and so forth. If you feel bad about yourself, l'chatchila, for every single bad thing you do, you're not going to get very far. But right now we're talking about emes, how things really are, the bittul of malchus of atzilus, the bittul of a rebbe. Okay, you're not there, so you have to live your life accordingly. But we're learning what it means to be a dalit. That you have this yud on you, and you're just in a state of continuously getting yourself out of the way.
Wait, one, it wasn't a direct quote, so obviously it sounds like it was watered down, which is great because we just heard the emes. Now, but the yud on the dalit.
Yeah.
Can you just clarify? That's
a bittul. Yud is chochmah bittul, and it's what makes the poverty of dalit, which the word dalit means poor. It's what makes it a holy poverty. Meaning it's poor because it has nothing of its own, because it's in a constant state of moving itself out of the way and receiving from Kedusha.
Because it's I like the end of Dalit, right? Is that why you're saying that it's...
Dalit has a yud, which means it bears the quality of bittul.
Dalit has a yud on the back, no?
Okay, yes, it's on the back. Yes. That's the Dalit in question. Mm-hmm. Okay. That's the yud in question. Ariel, you wanted to say something?
No, I was going to ask about the... Saying that obviously we can continue different getter existence, but an Elul leads right, but there's an avoda. Stopping and taking stock and making a heshbon, could you say that itself is an avoda?
Of course, it's an avoda.
Right. So that's. I'm trying to understand how that fits into the.
That's not satisfaction in your work. On the contrary, that's like a stock taking of what needs to get done further, right? It's a different kind of avoda, but it's not a relaxation by any means.
So which avoda are you saying? Praying and
all avoda, every single moment of your day, whether you're going to eat this, whether you're going to say this, whether you're going to walk there, whether you're going to stay in your seat, everything that you're doing is am I doing this to sort of get up and relax and take a break? Or am I putting myself back into the game? A constant state of avoda, right? We know the part of what it means to take a break. It's for example, right after Gemara class, right? That's a perfect time to realize what it means avoda, right? We're supposed to go into a state of chazara right away, basically. All right. So if obviously you need to switch gears, right? So there's a moment of of what do I do right now, right? In other words, I've got to move my seat, sit with my chavrusa. But what do we see very, very often happens? We learned good. Everyone used their brain really well. And then it's woo, gotta go get a coffee, go to the bathroom, have a cigarette, talk to my mom, have a lie down in bed. It's what happened? Complete breakdown. Because basically, it's normal. A person has some satisfaction from what they just did. They just really gave it their all. They served. They put themselves on the side. They contracted their mind and were totally in it. And that's avoda. And they were doing avoda. What happens is, right when we do something, we have a cookie, right? And that's normal. So it's very normal. But what he's saying is, that's all of a sudden you forgot there's a God for a moment there, right? Okay, there's something called exercise and relaxation, l'shem shamayim, 100%. And yeah, maybe we need a 5-minute break. Absolutely. But even the break, it's it's not a forgetfulness type of break, right? And then the whole idea of reassessing, getting back and refocusing, that's very difficult, right? Then has you ever been in a situation where you're learning a mimer and you took in an os, you took in another os, and you're wow, and then and you're okay, you sort of just have to regroup, and put yourself back in and learn another os. It's a total it's a filtering, a clearing the it's almost like going to sleep for a minute. Sleep is not necessarily a relaxation. And that sounds funny.
It's a restart.
It's exactly. It's like a reset. You need to sort of allow yourself to have a down moment, But the down moment is really just you read L'tzorach Aliyah. You're just like sort of, it's like you're going down in order to regroup. So that's sort of how our whole life is meant to be, believe it or not. Like there's no, what are you resting on? Like you have time, you know? We're going. Now of course you could stress yourself out and like go off the derech if you like it, if you start to feel this pressure upon yourself constantly, and that's what we were saying before. Like you have to know where you are, work with the mashpia, deal with the life that you actually have. But the emes is there's no breaks. It's just a constant regrouping, and that's called avoda. That's called kedusha. Sadly, we're not always in a state of kedusha. We'd like to be.
Also, like the Rebbe never took a vacation. Like, what is a vacation?
Not only the Rebbe never took a vacation, the Rebbe never sat back in his chair. I heard this from like good authority. The Rebbe sat on the edge of his chair. Like he was never like.
He wasn't just like,
He never. I mean, b'chlal. I mean, you're sitting there all day. You might think for a second, you just sort of put on your glasses. He could still read. You know what I'm saying? He could still answer letters. He didn't even for 1 second like stop like being there because he's the symbol of kedusha. We have to have at least one role model of truth, says God, and it's Malchus of Atzilus, the Melech Mamesh. He's just in a state of continuous reception. We want to be like him when we grow up, right? So try to be on. In other words, this is what it means to be a Beinoni in Tanya. It's like you're just constantly on. You don't drop the ball. You're dribbling. Okay.
Where we at?
Yeah, we're in the mimer somewhere.
Which line?
This is a bittul de bechinas malchus. The line is about 8 lines from the bottom of the paragraph on page 120. End of the line lechein, after the period. Lechein kol hagiloyim hu aydei shiflus va'bittul de bechinas malchus. Therefore, all revelation. We talk about the malchus is like the sphere which creates the world. Why is that? Because all revelation comes out through the bittul and the shiflus of malchus. In other words, there's something called divine revelation in the world of Atzilus, but it's blocked off from anyone else but Atzilus receiving it because there's something called malchus. It's in a constant state of reception. Therefore, there's in other words, only when there's a student, so to speak, does it allow the Rav to teach. Imagine if no one showed up today, right? So there would be no class given, right? So there has to be some listener in order for the Giluim of Atzilus to come out. So there's Baruch Hashem, there's a constant state of a listener. There's a state of perpetual nullity before the light, and that's what allows the light to come out pretty much in a perpetual state of Atzilus, and therefore all revelations come from Malchus of Atzilus. Did you get that? This is, now we can understand what it says in Tehillim, Te Hashem aznecha neini, lend your ear, Hashem, and answer me, ki ani ve'evyonani, because I am poor and impoverished. I am. So why are you answering me because I'm poor and impoverished? The Tefillah David, what is Tefillah David Bichlal? Is hiskashrus va'bitul bechinas malchus. Everyone knows David represents malchus. So the Tefillah the David, Tefillah means to connect, to join, to bind. So it's the hiskashrus, the connection, and the bittul of malchus. That's what it means, Tefillah David, right? It's the bittul of malchus towards Hashem. Hine godel tokef habakasha hate. It's such this strong request. Lend your ear or turn your ear to me, va'aneni, and answer me. Where does malchus get off making such a strong claim? Lend me your ear and answer me. Who are you, B'chlal malchus? Mipnei ma hu lefi da'ani ve'evyonani. Right? It's because I am poor and poverty-stricken. In other words, because I'm totally bittul and I'm not going to get in the way, I'm going to be a perfect student, a perfect receptor of what you're giving out. Therefore, I can demand, answer me, right? Based on the level of iskashrus, is your demand of give me more received? So it's very deep when it comes to like a iskashrus of a chassid with a rebbe, because you want to open a Chabad house, you want to buy a $2 million building. Right? You want 400 students in your building. No problem. The Rebbe's got all that on tap. But the question is, how much hiskashrus do you have? In other words, answer me, give me is all good when you are going to get out of the way and let the flow and the giluim be his. If it's going to be you, you're going to take it and run with it. He's not giving because you're not receiving. It doesn't work like that. You can't get the true flow of Hashem and be there at the same time. So to the degree of your tefillah David, ki ani ve'evyon ani, because I'm poor and poverty stricken, I want to connect to you. You could say aneni, give me. That's why it's all about his kashrus in the end of the day.
What's his kashrus?
His kashrus is binding yourself to the Rebbe,
Kesher.
tying yourself in a knot. In other words, you don't have to. You can receive also not from kedusha. They also give, but we're going to see that's called a reish. You don't want to be that type of poor. True b'chinas abitul b'chinas malchus. This inyan of answer me because I'm poor. This is an inyan of the bittul of malchus. V'zeu ha'os dalid, and this is what the dalid represents. Masha ein kin reish. Not so the reish ein bo yud. The reish does not have the yud. She'ein bo b'chinas habitul. It wants and answer me, but because I'm a big billionaire and I'm smarter than everybody else, that's why you should give me.
But when you write it in letters, it has you. No?
A reish has a yud?
Reish, yud, shin.
In the word reish.
Yeah.
Okay. But I'm saying the actual shape of the letter reish, it doesn't have that yud sticking out on the back of it, which is what the dalid has, which differentiates them. The dalid has the yud in the letter itself. The reish has no yud. But you're right. I mean, look, at the end of the day, and I heard a few like gasps. We said the reish is like a letter of klippa. Like it's crazy there's such a thing called a letter of klippa, right? But the truth is that it obviously it's one of the 22 osios of kedusha as well. So it has a little yud in there. What it represents is the klippas.
Why is the word in kosher okay? Because there's letters.
First of all, it's not a kuf, it's a chaf. But secondly, you got a point. You could ask why does bracha, which eventually the base was chosen to create the world, and right away after the base you got a reish. In other words, so I'm saying it's not so simple that just because it's a reish in a word.
The reish.
Oh, we turned the
The reish.
kedusha.
The reish is in the first word of the Torah. Reish.
Right. So I'm saying, in other words, they have good in them, obviously, all the letters. But in other words, the symbol of it is, everything comes from these letters, including klippas. So that's what I'm saying. God forbid the letter itself is klippa, chas v'chalila. But in other words, it shows itself on the side of klippa, which means when Hashem wants to unleash His powers of klippa, He also has some letters for that, right? And so those are the letters that are. It's almost like a more pristine position to have to go and do like the dirty work of the king, so to speak. Anyway, so the reish has no yud. She'ein bo b'chinas habitul. It doesn't have the bitul. But adarabba, on the contrary, hu b'chinas yeshus v'gasus. It represents arrogance and self. V'lechein hu masvun de'is chaziu al sitra bisha. And therefore, it's from the letters that shows itself on the other side, the side of evil. V'anius v'adalus de sitra achra. And this is already a different type of poverty. It's a poverty of the sitra achra, not a poverty of kedusha. Hu she'ein lehem shaychus lelukus. And what's that called? What's that poverty called? They have no connection to God. It's a real poverty. It's not a poverty of bittul, of self-effacement. On the contrary, it's total arrogance. And the more arrogant you are, the less you're connected to the king. He doesn't want to have to do with you. So your mom is poor because you're totally disconnected and on your own. And that's the klippa and the sitra achra. It's the real poor one, right? Because it's totally disconnected from the truth. V'zeh atzmo ma she'ein lehem shaychus lelukus v'anius v'adalus shelehem. And this itself, they don't have any connection to God, and their poorness. So it becomes a slippery slope, because the fact that they have no connection to God, and they're poor, right? This pushes them level after level. It makes them more arrogant, right? In other words, because their whole situation is that they're building themselves up and defining themselves of how great they are. And that's what this is like a very important line for society, basically, because the whole definition is how much are you worth, right? That's what people ask, and they're not talking about like, well, I'm kind and special and I have good talents. No, how many dollars and cents are you worth, right? How many people can you buy, right? So the more people you can buy, the more you're worth. So this is like a very dangerous like movie that's going on in your head, because the more you succeed, the poorer you get. The more disconnected you get, the more arrogant you are, the more poverty-stricken you are from the truth. So you go from dechi el dechi, you get pushed and pushed lower and lower when you have this like sort of false reality going on. that it's a slippery slope that drives you in a state of further and further impoverishing yourself.
The life is a false reality.
Well, it depends. Life, real life is God. Divrei Elokim Chaim.
We just learned in Tanya that we're nothing, like literally.
Again, but if you're nothing, then what are you? Then you're Hashem, because He's not nothing, right? So that's the whole point. If you get out of the way,
Okay, I'm God.
yeah, exactly. Or you're God, and then you're mamash nothing.
Okay. I'll be nothing and be God.
Well, there's nothing else to do.
No, but you know what I'm saying though. It's like a play on words, but that very thing, I'm nothing, I'm God,
I'm
right?
God.
Is exactly what we're talking about right here, right? Because what does mean nothing? There's two states of nothing. There's the true godly nothing, in which case you truly are God, because you're not there. Who's in your place is God.
Yeah.
Or there's I'm God. You think you're somebody, and therefore you're mamish nothing, not in the godly nothing. Like you are not even connected to life. You're dead, right? So it's a very interesting little play on words there. Kitzer. Summing up chapter 6 and moving into chapter 7, Kitzer, Dalid, V'reish, Shneim, Perush, Dalus. When it comes to the Dalid and the Reish, they both mean poor. Dalid, the Kedusha, Yud Ma'achara. But Dalid is on the side of Kedusha because it has the Yud hanging off the back. Tachlis, Abitul, which represents ultimate self-effacement. V'alidezehu, Kli l'Kabbalah. Therefore, it can receive, and it receives Lukus, and that's what makes it holy. Yamshil b'talmid, which is compared to a student, it has to be in a state of absolute non-being, be'eis HaKabbalah, at least at the time of reception, at least that foundation. Then he can go and build his great building. Not so when it comes to the letter Reish. It has all the opposite qualities. Now, we're going into Os Zayin. This is the year of the Os Zayin. In other words, as we said before, Basi Legani is 20 osios. Why is the original Basi Legani that we're going to learn? We're going to learn Bezrat Hashem, all 20 osios, hopefully before Yud Shvat. And the idea is that, as we said earlier, every year from the beginning of the Rebbe's Nesias, he gave her a mimer on one os. The first year he gave a mimer on os Aleph, the second year on os Beis, etc., etc. So he gave her the whole thing 20 Maimarim after 20 years, a very deep and penetrating lesson of what Basi Legani is, and then he did the whole thing a second time. So we have 2 Maimarim on each os over a span of 40 years, and then, as Hasidim want to say, that it never really stopped after that. In other words, even though the Rebbe didn't give Maimarim, but we're still living out that os. So it was then another 20 years, and that was that already happened as well. We're already after 60 years, so we've already got. Now we're in the 4th cycle, as it were, from Basi Legani, and so we're in the 7th year of the 4th cycle. So the os that we're learning this year is the os that we're about to start, Os Zayin.
5777.
5710.
Right.
5710. That was 5710.
Right.
7 years ago.
Right, so it's 67 years ago, right?
67 years.
67 years ago, right?
Yeah, so we're in the 6th cycle, 7 years. Okay.
So we're in the 7th os. So this is let's focus deeply on this os. There's 2 Maimarim, obviously based on this os. So we're not going to obviously do them in class because we're going to try and we have another project in our hand. We're going to get through 20 osios of Basi Legani, the original. But everybody should try to make it a point in themselves for sure before Yud Shvat to try to read these 2 osios that the Rebbe wrote on the Os Zayin that we're going to start reading tomorrow. If you want them, I can send them to you. I have them. I'll put it on the group of the yeshiva. These 2 Maimarim in a file there, and everyone, not in English, but you guys are Talmidei Chachamim. You can handle yourselves, and try and get into them. So I'll bring some of this Perushim of the Rebbe as we read it. But obviously, it's nothing compared to reading the Maimer of the Rebbe, Bechlal.
Why specifically Zion?
Did you not follow what I just said, brother?
Yeah, the 7th year of the 4th cycle.
Yeah, so that's why. So that if the Rebbe was giving a Maimer this year, he would be giving a Maimer based on chapter 7 of Basi Legani. That didn't come clear, that whole thing? No?
I mean.
I'll say it again.
Now
I just don't want to. You understand what's going on here? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, every
So
year
there's
has
2
an
Maimarim
os.
on this.
Every year
There's already 2 because the first 2 sets of 20 years the Rebbe gave a Maimer. The next that Rebbe wasn't around anymore. I mean, in the way that he's giving Maimarim. So the idea is that we don't have a third set, nor do we have a fourth set.
So there's 41 different
but we're
members
still
on Basi Legani.
no, they're not exactly, but there's approximately there's 40. Yeah.
Whoa. You should learn all 40 this year.
Okay, so we're gonna. I guess we don't really have time to properly dive into this. Oh, so we'll start fresh tomorrow. Os Zion, it's the special Os of the year, and anyone who doesn't understand why, I'll tell you after class again.